Okay, so this is, I hope we're all well. This is our third and final shiur in preparation for Pesach. Last week we talked about koshering utensils for Pesach. The week before we talked about general preparation for Pesach. And tonight we want to discuss in detail the halachot for the actual Seder, what we need to be aware of during the Seder itself, and also the ideas of why we are doing what we are doing throughout the night. So we have an understanding of not just how to do things, but actually why we do things as we go along. As always, feel free to ask any questions. We're going to try to get through the whole Seder. This is quite a lot to get through. And we'll have a chance for general questions at the end of the shiur as well. So, starting with the Seder plate. So the Seder plate, we know different customs, how exactly to set out the different items, but we all agree on what the items are, and they are the 3 matzot, of course. Now, ask most children who have gone to a Jewish school why we have 3 matzot, they'll come home and they'll tell you something about Kohen, Levi, Israel, or 3 types of Jews, all this lovely stuff. That's not the reason. The reason why we have 3 matzot is simply because we have 2 matzot, as we do for every Shabbat and every Chag, for the Lechem Mishneh, and we have an extra matzah for to break for Yachatz. That's the reason why we have 3 matzot, and any other reason is lovely, but we have to understand always the pshat, the main reasons, before we give extra reasons. Then we have the zeroah and the betzah. So in biblical times, we would have on Pesach, we would have a korban Pesach and a korban chagiga. All other chagim, they would sacrifice only the korban chagiga, which was a festive sacrifice. On Pesach, we would also have the paschal lamb. And because we no longer have this, we have 2 items on the Seder to remind ourselves of these 2 things. We use the zeroah, which is the shank bone, to remind ourselves of the korban Pesach. And the reason we use a shank bone, really you can use any piece of meat, but we use a shank bone because it says in the pasuk, God took us out with an outstretched arm. That's the only reason why we use a zeroah. But in essence, it's any piece of meat. And we have a betzah to remember the korban chagiga. We have an egg to remember it. Now, why an egg? You could use anything, really. You can't use a piece of meat because you already used a piece of meat. But use an egg, and various reasons are given. I think the best reason is because there is a tinge of avilut, there is a tinge of mourning to this, because we don't have the temple. And also, it's well known in our calendar that every year you can tell what day Tisha B'Av will be based on when Pesach will be. Yeah, so without even looking at the calendar, I can tell you that Tisha B'Av this year will fall on Friday night Shabbat, and will be postponed to Saturday night Sunday. Because it will always fall on the same day, because there is this element of mourning during Pesach that although we have the Seder and everything's beautiful, but at the end of the day we don't have the ideal way how we should have it, and that's why we have the betzah. The egg is always the sign of mourning because of the roundness of it. We of course have the karpas, different customs as to what the karpas is. Generally, the Sfaradim used things as parsley and celery. The Ashkenazim in Europe didn't have access to these things, and therefore they had to suffice with potatoes. But in essence, any vegetable suffices for karpas. And for maror and hazeret, we use lettuce for both, although Ashkenazim use lettuce for one and horseradish for the other. And haroset is, of course, to remind us of the servitude and the mortar which we experience. So these are the different items, and we will go through each of them as we go through the entire Seder. So a couple of points to mention with regards to this year, the first night and the second night. So first night falls on Friday night. Second night falls on Motzei Shabbat. So the problem with it falling on Motzei Shabbat is that you cannot begin before nightfall, because in Kiddush on the second night, you have to do Havdalah with a candle. So you cannot begin before second nightfall, which is about 10 minutes to 9 or so. And additionally, the halacha is you're not allowed to prepare from one day chag to the other day chag, or the more so from Shabbat to second day chag, because Shabbat is the highest holiness. So it's forbidden to prepare. However, it is permissible to prepare from sunset without doing any work activity, i.e. just setting out the table without heating the food, without doing anything which is forbidden to do on Shabbat, is permissible from sunset. The reason being is we have a principle that an isur de rabbanan ben hashemashot letzorich mitzvah is mutar, which means something which is forbidden rabbinically, i.e. preparation from Shabbat to weekday or even to second day Yom Tov, is forbidden rabbinically, and it's twilight, and it's for the purposes of a mitzvah, therefore it's permissible. So therefore, on the second night, although one cannot start the Seder till 8:52 or so, till it's nightfall, in order to do the Kiddush and the Havdalah, nonetheless, one can start to lay the table, the cutlery and the crockery, ready from sunset, which is just after 8 p.m.
Can I ask, do the Ashkenaz hold by that? I've never heard that.
So it's not simple whether Ashkenazim hold that or not. The reason why they may not hold, the Mishnah Berurah is doubtful about it. The reason being is everyone agrees to the principle that Shvut ben Hashmashol Tzorich Mitzvah is mutar. That's clear in the Shulchan Aruch. The question is, does this apply only from Friday to Shabbat, i.e. Friday twilight? Everyone agrees, even the Ashkenazim, that you can do a D'Rabbanan at twilight for the purposes of a mitzvah. So, for example, the example given is you have the shofar stuck in the tree. I don't know how it got there, but the shofar is stuck in the tree, and you want to take it down for whatever reason, or to and it's a tzorich mitzvah. You're allowed to take it down ben hashmashot, and that everyone agrees to. What's debated is whether this also applies on Saturday going into Saturday night. So the reason why it's easier Friday going into Shabbat is because you're going from Hol into Kodesh. Then we say we keep the Chazakah Dehashta, we keep the presumption of now and assume it's still weekday. The Mishnah Berurah for the Ashkenazim is doubtful whether this also applies from Shabbat into Motzei Shabbat, where you have Chazakah, you have a presumption of it being Shabbat. However, we Sfaradim definitely hold that it also applies on the way out as well. And therefore, that's why we hold it's permissible to do so. So that's with regards to the second night. With regards to the first night, lots of people are asking this year, what's the earliest time to begin? Because, it's very late this year. It's falling mid-April, and to wait till 8:50 is problematic. And I understand it is difficult with young children to have to wait till so late. So what I say is that in countries such as England, where in the Northern Hemisphere, one can be lenient if necessary and begin the Seder from sunset, which is going to be 8 o'clock on the first night, provided Magid does not begin before nightfall. And the reason being is simple, is that the only mitzvot from the Torah which we are obligated in during the night are the mitzvot of matzah and of the relating the Exodus from Egypt. Those are the only two mitzvot which are biblically mandated. All the other mitzvot which we do, such as the leaning, such as the 4 cups, such as the maror, and so on and so forth, are only rabbinically mandated. And mitzvot which are rabbinically mandated, if necessary, one can already do from sunset. And therefore, although it's certainly correct to begin from nightfall, if it's necessary, one may already begin from sunset, from 8 p.m., begin the Kiddush and begin Urhat, Karpas, Yahat, as long as Magid, relating the Exodus from Egypt, doesn't begin before 10 to 9, because that's the main part of the night, the mitzvah of relating the story, and that has to be done after nightfall. So that's important to bear in mind. Second night it definitely has to be a nightfall because of what we've explained. But even first night, although in the first instance it should be a nightfall, if necessary, it may already be done from sunset, as long as Magid doesn't begin before nightfall. Now, the reason we have 4 cups, the idea of having the cups of wine is an expression of freedom. Why 4? 4 is either because of the 4 expressions of redemption written in Parashat Vayera, or because of the 4 exiles which we have survived throughout our history. Now, when it comes to the 4 cups of wine, or grape juice for that matter, grape juice is, for all intents and purposes, has the same halachic status as wine. There is a preference for non-mevushal wine for kiddush every Friday night and the 4 cups of wine, but we're not most people are not particular about that, and therefore on Pesach night there's no reason to be particular about it if you're not particular about it during the rest of the year. So therefore 4 cups of grape juice suffice, and they should be red. Whether a person is having grape juice or having wine, the wine should be red wine and not white wine. The reason being is the idea again of the dam, of the blood, and also the richness of the color, of the red color. That's why we have red wine or grape juice. Of course,
Diane Carter, how big should the cups be? What's the minimum size?
I'm going to get to that, David. I'm going to get to that. So, good question. So, should be red wine. Now, kiddush each Friday night or on Shabbat morning, one person does kiddush for everyone, and that suffices. We don't need to drink. Yeah, I know it's customary that we do take a sip, but it's not really necessary. Strictly speaking, as long as one person makes the kiddush and drinks the necessary amount, that is okay. However, on Pesach night, it's not sufficient. We each have to drink around the table. The reason being is because in the 4 cups of wine, especially in the first cup, there are 2 things going on. One thing going on is the regular kiddush, which we do every Chag and every Shabbat. And from that perspective, one really could do kiddush and one person to drink. But then there's the other thing of the experience of freedom, that we ourselves have to experience the herut. Now, one person cannot experience freedom on behalf of the other. To experience freedom, you have to experience it yourself. And that's why each and every one of us around the table, even if we're hearing the kiddush from one person, and that's okay for the mitzvah of the kiddush, or for the mitzvah of drinking, that has to be done through the person himself. Now, with regard to David's question, how much do you need to drink? So it's interesting, and this comes back to what I just said, is that during the rest of the year, when we have on Friday night kiddush, all that needs to be drunk is a milol lugmav, is a cheekful, which is 44 milliliters, quite little. A small plastic cup is 170 or 80 milliliters. So it's about 1/4 of that, of a plastic cup, is on a Friday night. However, on Pesach, each person needs to drink a revi'it. A revi'it is just under 90 milliliters. So if you're thinking of this plastic cup I just gave, it would be half of that. It's written that it's good practice to have the majority of the cup, but it's not strictly necessary. Therefore, if you've got, some people like to bring out on Pesach their huge cups, that's nice, but then they only take a few sips or only drink a bit of it. That's not you're meant to drink at least 90 milliliters or the majority of the cup. So that's the amount that's how big the cups should be. So sometimes you get these tiny cups. No, that doesn't do the job, because those are going to be less than 86 milliliters. So you're looking for a cup, which doesn't have to be huge. It can be a small cup, but you can measure it before Chag, or even on Chag if necessary, with a non-electrical appliance. And you can, as long as it's got 86 milliliters in it, then one drinks that. One should drink within 1 or 2 gulps. One shouldn't sip it. Yeah, I know it's nice to sip it, and one could argue that's a nice way of experiencing the freedom. But for halachic reasons, one should really be drinking it within a couple of gulps. Now, the mitzvah of leaning is an intrinsic mitzvah of the night, of the 4 cups, and also of the matzah. And again, you see people doing the leaning and just bending their head back. That's not the way of leaning. If you look how the concept of leaning is drawn from the Romans, because that was the time of the rabbis were living, and they looked around the nobility of their time and they saw the Roman nobility, and they echoed that. And so when you think about how the Romans would eat and how they would lean and recline when they were eating, that's what we are talking about. Now, there are Rishonim, medieval commentators, who argued that nowadays, this was already in the 12th, 13th century, where we no longer eat like that, it's no longer necessary to lean. However, the Sfaradi opinion, the Ashkenazim hold that, not in the first instance, but at least post facto, meaning that if you drank or ate the matzah without leaning, it's fine, whereas we Sfaradim hold that no, since this was a comprehensive enactment made by the Hachamim at the time, that continues till today, and therefore one must insist that one leans, both men and women. For Sfaradim, both men and women need to lean. There's no difference between the two today. They both need to lean, and one leans to one's left and to the back of one's chair. But just sitting back and jolting one's head backwards, that does not suffice to fulfill this mitzvah. Now, when doing the kiddush, and one says the beracha of borei priya gefen, one has in mind, at least for the Sfaradim, one has in mind the second cup as well, because the Ashkenazim make a beracha on each of the 4 cups. We don't. We make a beracha on the first cup and on the third cup. So when we say borei priya gefen, we have in mind the second cup. And when we say borei priya gefen on the third cup, we have in mind the 4th cup. Now, additionally, when we say shehayanu in the kiddush, we should be having in mind the shehayanu that God has brought us to this night. We have in mind all the mitzvot we are going to perform that night. So it's not just the kiddush, it's not just the chag which we've come to, it's also the mitzvah of eating of the matzah, the mitzvah of eating the maror, and all the other the mitzvah relating the exodus from Egypt. All of these beautiful mitzvot which we have, when we say shehayanu, we thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the being brought to this evening. We have in mind all that's going to be during this night. We should. Now, there's a nice custom that one person pours for his neighbor. It's not strictly required halachically, but it's a nice practice to have. Now, it's not necessary, according to the halacha, to wash the cup out in between each cup. So if you have a large cup and you drink your 86 milliliters and you have a bit of the cup left with grape juice in it, it's not necessary to pour that out, wash the cup, and then pour again. One can pour straight in the second cup, the third cup, and so on and so forth. And someone who used to be at Chacham Ovadiah's table told me that that's what he would do. He wouldn't wash it out in between. He would just pour in and use that for the second cup. So it's not, according to the Kabbalah, yes, you need to wash out each time, the inside and the outside, that's true. But according to the halakha, it's not necessary to do so. One halakha, which I hope isn't necessarily practical, but underscores something important, and that's as follows. Children, the Gemara tells us, interestingly, are not even the children who have reached the age of education, who normally we encourage to do mitzvot, are not required to drink the 4 cups. We don't go into the reasoning now, but they're not required to do so under the age of bar and bat mitzvah. Of course we do, because it's part of the evening, it's part of the excitement. But Chacham Ovadiah says something very interesting. He says, look, if you're not required to do so, and a person is short on financial resources, certainly no question about it, one should be using money to buy treats for the children throughout the evening, because that's written in the Gemara, and it's written in the Halakha, that you're meant to encourage the children. So we're told, what do the men, the women, and the children like? The men like their meat, the women like their clothes, and the children like their nuts. Okay, that was the treats in those days. If you got nuts, that was a big treat. Okay, so I think nowadays we need to be a bit more creative with our treats. But in any case, it's really important to underscore how we must, in advance, think and be creative with ways to ensure that our children are engaged and are involved, to reward them, to praise them, and to have things on hand to ensure their participation in the evening. Yeah, the essence of the night is Vigadatali Bincha, to tell our children. And so therefore anything which we can do, and that's what Chacham Ovadiah is telling us. If you're going to have to spend money on all the 4 cups of wine for grape juice for all the kids, and you're not going to have money to spend it on entertainment for the children, that's not good. Better to spend money on entertainment for the children, because that's really the root of the evening, passing on our beautiful Mesorah, our beautiful tradition to our children. Okay, so that's Kadesh. Are there any questions on Kadesh before we move on to the next part? A brief question.
Diane, may I ask you a quick question? We have the 4 cups of wine. I always thought, because of the 4, for the Magid, for the Kiddush, for the Magid, for the Hallel, and for the Birchat HaMazon. So I thought that was the reason why we have not just the 4 women and whatever else without taking time. So you have just, Diane, told us that the Sephardim, and I've forgotten this because I've been married to an Ashkenazi, we only make the Sephardim, we only made the Beracha on the first cup of wine, and which other one, please?
The first and the third.
And the third, so that's Hallel.
Correct, on the Hallel. Because we hold that the Beracha which we recite as Kiddush continues till Borei Pri HaGefen for the second cup. And once we say Birkat Hamazon, then we've closed that beracha. And so after Birkat Hamazon, we say Borei Pri HaGefen again. Like any time we do Birkat Hamazon and we have grape juice, we say Al HaGefen after, we say Borei Pri HaGefen after. And then that covers the fourth blessing as well. But you are right in what you said, actually. That's the main reason. Yes, Zoom user, did you want to ask something?
Thank you.
Okay, fine. Urhatz. Moving on to Urhatz now. So again, ask your standard child who comes home from school why we do Urhatz. They will tell you that we do it so that we ask questions. That's wrong for Sfaradim. The reason we wash our hands is because this is the halakha required the entire year round. Halachically, anytime one dips vegetables into liquid, one of the 7 liquids, one of them being water, obviously, one needs to wash hands without a beracha. This applies throughout the year. We do without a beracha because there's a debate about it. But we, the Sfaradim, the Shulchan Aruch follows the opinion that one needs to do this entire year round. And that's why we do it on Pesach night. The Ashkenazim didn't hold that. And in fact, when this law is discussed about netilat yadayim for vegetable dipping in, our authorities bring a proof on Pesach night. We say, look, we do this on Pesach night, so it's a proof. And the Ashkenazi authorities responded by saying, no, you can't bring a proof on Pesach night because we do that to arouse the curiosity of the children. But really, for us, urhatz is because this is the halakha throughout the year, that whenever we dip vegetables into water, we wash our hands. Between urhatz and karpas, one may speak. There's no reason one shouldn't speak as long as it's relevant to what's going on. You don't have a complete break in between the washing and the eating. And then we move on to karpas. And karpas is the dipping of parsley or celery into salt water or lemon water, each one according to their custom. Now, this karpas, the reason we have it, there's 2 different reasons and different ramifications of these 2 different reasons. The main reason we are given is that we have this salt water to remind us of the tears. So we take something and we dip it in and then we ingest it within us to ingest within ourselves the tears and the crying of Am Yisrael whilst we are in Egypt. Now, on that reading, it's not appropriate to lean because the whole purpose of leaning is that we are trying to demonstrate nobility. It doesn't apply if we're trying to remind ourselves of the servitude we went through. However, and that's what we hold, we don't need to lean because that's the main reason. However, there is a second reason given why we do karpas, and that is that actually this is the way of nobility, that we have hors d'oeuvres before we have the main meal. So this is meant to be opening up our appetite. And on that reading, it's recommended that we do lean. So this is why you may find some who during karpas may take another piece and do one piece without leaning, one piece with leaning to fulfill both opinions. However, as I've said, the main reason is the reason which we've explained, which is why, generally speaking, the minhag is we do not lean for the karpas when we dip it in and we eat it. Now, when we say the beracha borei pri ha'adama for the karpas, because before we eating the vegetable, we say borei pri ha'adama. That beracha is meant to last a long time. In fact, that beracha is meant to go on all the way till maror, for the lettuce which we eat in maror. And this is why we are told that one shouldn't eat more than a kazait. One should have a small amount of the celery or of the parsley, just to really a taste of it, to dip it in. The main thing isn't the eating of the vegetable. I want to make this clear. The main thing is the dipping within the liquid. That's the main point of it. And that's why you're meant to take a very small piece, dip that in and eat it. You're not meant to be having a lot of it. Because if you have a lot of it, then it's required to say the after blessing. And once you say the after blessing, you're closing off the first blessing of borei pri ha'adama. That's why when we eat the karpas, we have a very small amount of the karpas, less than 18 grams or so that we do not need to say an after blessing, and our beracha will remain all the way through till maror. If for whatever reason one did eat a lot, then one still doesn't say the after blessing. So that's the reason why we do karpas. And if you don't have parsley, you don't have celery, don't worry about it. Yeah, one doesn't need to drive themselves mad to find parsley or celery. Any vegetable does the job. It's clear that it works.
Diane Carter, I went to a Yemenite Seder with people following the Yemenite tradition, and they had a lot of karpas in terms of celery, radishes. It was the whole table was covered in karpas, and they ate that during the
At Karpas or late? At Karpas or
at
late?
karpas, and then constantly until till basically the meal.
Can I ask, was this a learned family?
Yeah,
I'll
it
tell
was
you
a
why.
Yemenite tradition.
No, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you where it comes from. If you're telling me they were eating it out throughout, I'll tell you where it comes from. Now we're going into deep halachic technicalities. One of the big issues discussed with the Seder is how on earth does the blessing of Karpas last all the way through till Maror? And in fact, some of the authorities suggested that throughout one eats a bit more, so it continues the blessing throughout. So that's where it may be coming from. You know, it's eating in one go, a kazait or more, but it may be, I'm just trying to explain where this custom came from. If they were following that's having small bits throughout, so the blessing continues all the way through till Maror. That's very
But we thought it was a very good idea because then it keeps the children calm until Maror.
You mean they've got something to chew on?
Exactly.
Don't worry.
And not only the children, let me tell you.
The truth is, the kids can eat whatever they want throughout the evening, as long as they're being encouraged. They don't have to worry about what they can eat. But you're right. For the adults, it can get And strictly speaking, it's permissible to eat if necessary. If necessary, it is permissible to eat during Magid. Okay.
Guy, may I quickly ask you then, if this Yemenite tradition, they ate so much, then do they have to make a bracha achrona?
No, what I'm suggesting is they were eating small bits throughout.
No, that I understand. But the other gentleman, I'm sorry, I don't know his name, said something important. He said they ate an awful lot of it. So did they make a bracha achrona?
No, you don't make a bracha achrona. You don't make a bracha achrona. Even if you did, you don't make a bracha achrona.
You don't?
You don't because you don't.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yahats. So the reason we have yahats is because we're meant to read the Haggadah on broken bread. That's the idea why we break the matzah just before Magid, because ha lahma'anya, we're going to say, this is the bread of affliction and this is going to be the broken bread. That's why we break the bread into two pieces. We don't break the top one because we want to keep the top one intact for the beracha we're going to make later on the matzah. So that's why we keep it intact. So therefore, that's why we break the middle matzah and not the top one. So that, on the one hand, we have a complete matzah for later on. On the other hand, we do have a broken matzah, so that when we are saying the Haggadah, we are saying the Haggadah upon a broken matzah. So the bigger piece is kept aside for afikomin, and the smaller piece is put underneath. Yeah, we have the custom, the Syrians and the Iraqis have the custom that we break it into a vav and a dalet. Okay, many reasons are given for that. The main thing is it's broken into two pieces, with the bigger piece being put aside for afikomin, and we put aside the afikomin so that we don't forget and eat up all the matzah and there's nothing left to eat in the end. That's the reason why we have afikomin, by the way. The reason we have afikomin at the end is because you need to have matzah at the end of the meal, right at the end. And we're concerned, if you don't put something aside at the beginning, then you're going to eat throughout the night, and you're going to come to the end, there's no more afikomin. That's why we have it. So that's why we put aside the bigger piece for that, and the smaller piece to have the broken bread whilst we are saying the Haggadah. Now, the custom of stealing the afikomin and playing ransom with it is actually based on the words of the Rambam, because the Rambam writes, Hotfin, you snatch away the afikomin, okay? And the idea, the simple reading of the Rambam is that you snatch it away so that you're going to ensure there's left over to the end. However, some took this and developed it to some kind of, you snatch it away and you play ransom, etc. That's not our minhag of the Sfaradim to do so. It's questionable whether this is good practice to educate our children to steal mitzvot and then to not to give it back until they get their demands. I'm not sure that's good practice. So that's it. Our minhag, the Syrian minhag, and also the Iraqi one, is we take the matzah, we put it on our shoulders, each one from oldest to youngest, all the boys and all the girls from oldest to youngest, and we each say we each ask each other questions. Where are you going from? Where are you coming from? Where are you going to? What do you have in your possessions? We ask each other in Arabic, and then we put it aside at the end. That's our minhag. Okay, now we move on to Magid, which is the focal point of the night. Now, what's very interesting about Magid is that this is a mitzvah of relating about the Exodus from Egypt. The problem is that this is a mitzvah which we have every single night of the year, which is why we say the Shema each night of the year, where we say Lema'an tizkeru v'asim konsultai. There's a mitzvah from the Torah each night to remember the Exodus from Egypt. And so why is it that we place so much emphasis on Pesach night when in fact the truth is we have this mitzvah each night? And the answers to this underscore what we are meant to be doing on Pesach night. Firstly, is that during the rest of the year, we just state that we left Egypt. We do that in the Shema, we left Egypt. Whereas on Pesach night, it has to be done in the form of question and answer. And the reason why question and answer is so important on Pesach night is because we are demonstrating our mental freedom. On the one hand, we demonstrate our physical freedom by the fact that we lean, we drink the 4 cups of wine, and so on and so forth. But there was also an intellectual slavery in Egypt. In fact, Paro, when Moshe came to Paro and asked Paro at the very beginning for a 3-day holiday, Paro responded and he said, if you've got time to think about a 3-day holiday, then you're not working hard enough. Increase the workload upon them. And from this, our rabbis taught that Paro's ultimate goal was to try to cut off our ability to think for ourselves. And when we came out, we weren't just free physically from the labor, but we were also free mentally. And the greatest way to demonstrate intellectual and mental freedom is when we ask questions, as long as they're done in the correct and genuine way, right? Not in a rhetorical manner as the Rasha does. As long as done in that manner, then absolutely they are encouraged. And that's why throughout the evening we are always doing things to encourage questions. It's not just the questions need answers. In fact, even if the questions don't get answers, that's not the point. We're not asking the questions as a means to the answer. We are asking the questions as a means in themselves to demonstrate our mental freedom, which is why the halakha is in the Gemara and the Rambam, that if a person is alone for Pesach, he still asks man ishtana, even if you're alone, because it's the idea of asking questions, which is the demonstration of the mental freedom. And the second difference between this night and all other nights is that this is a dialogue. Adding on to the same idea, it's a dialogue, and you're meant to experience it. We say at the end of Magid, we have to actually try to feel it ourselves, try to experience it ourselves. So that's why it's not just a recollection, a historical recollection of the past, which we do on a nightly basis. It's more than that, it's an experiential adventure through the night, and that's what's so unique about the evening. And what's really important, and I say this every year, is that Magid is not a prayer. Okay? Many of us pray and we don't always understand what we are praying, and there is still value to that, because there is value in halakha of worship of the divine, even if we don't recognize what we're saying, but understanding that we are standing in the presence of the divine, the presence of the Shekhinah, and that's valuable in itself. Even if a person prays doesn't understand what they're praying, but that has value. Haggadah isn't a prayer. There is absolutely no value in reading the Haggadah if one has no idea what they are talking about. In fact, the Haggadah is only a springboard for further discussion. You know, we make a beracha on the reading of the matzah. We don't make a beracha on the mitzvah of the retelling of the Exodus from Egypt. Why not? So the main answer given is because this is a mitzvah which has no end to it. The entire night one has a mitzvah to talk about Egypt. The rabbis at the time gave us a framework of what we call today Magid, which we can use as an opening for further discussion. But it's not that we need to read each word of the Haggadah and like that we do the mitzvah, we don't do the mitzvah. Absolutely not. That should not be our aim and objective, is to read the entire Haggadah. Of course, we should be reading it, but using it as a springboard for discussion. So we read a paragraph. If it's not understood in Hebrew, you can read it in English, or for that matter, the main parts of the Haggadah, which I'll say in a moment, do in Hebrew and the rest do in English. There's absolutely no necessity to have to read the entire Magid in Hebrew. What's more important is to understand what's being said and to discuss it, to debate it, and to tell it over. The main part of the Magid, for those who aren't able to be there the whole evening, for whatever reason, the main parts are Man Ishtana, Avadim Hayinu, Bechol Dor Vador, and the Hallel at the end of Magid. That's the main parts of the Haggadah. And those, especially the blessings at the end, those should be said in Hebrew. But the rest of the Haggadah can be said in English, and one should use them not as set text, but as a text to open discussion and debate. By the way, men and women are equal in this. Okay, are there any questions on Yachatz, Magid, before we move on to Motzi Matzah?
Yes, very quickly, Diane. You said the main parts were Manish, Tana, Avadim, Hayinu, Bechol Dor Vador, and what was the last one?
The Hallel at the end.
Oh, of course, the Hallel. Now, can I ask a quick question? I thought that, Pesach, Matzah, Umaror are the three things that we have to hear. That even they say that even.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You're 100% right. I meant instead of Bechol, I meant Rabban Gamliel Omer. I'm so sorry. You're 100% right. Thank you for that, Flora. Let me correct that. Yes, you are right. I meant to say the paragraph for Rabban Gamliel Omer. It's just the paragraph.
Right.
The paragraph for Rabban Gamliel Omer, that's the one which you have to say. Avadim Hayinu, Manishtana, Rabban Gamliel Omer, and the Hallel at the end, the two blessings, Hallelujah, and Asher Ga'alanu. Thank you for that, Flora. If there's extra time, then you do Mitahila, because that talks about how we came out, and it talks about our history, and also Bechol Dor Vador. These are the extras. But again, it's really important that we see the Magid as a framework for discussion. And also, Magid doesn't end there, by the way. Yeah, Magid isn't just there, and then you stop. It's the whole, throughout the evening we can talk about it. We talk about the midrashim or the rabbinic statements about the night, etc. Throughout the night, it's wrong to confine Magid to Magid and then that's it. And then we finish Magid. Now we're not going to talk about Egypt the rest of the evening. Now we'll go through the rest of the Seder and talk about everything else. No, that's just one place where we have to do it. But in essence, the entire evening is open for discussion and debate. Okay, then we move on to Rohtzah. Rohtzah is, of course, we wash hands as we always do on when we have bread or matzah. There's nothing special about that. And then we begin Motzi Matzah. So Motzi Matzah, we take the 3 matzot in our hand. And the reason we take the 3 matzot in our hand is because, as I said earlier on Shabbat and Yom Tov, we need to have 2 matzot, complete matzot. And since we've broken the middle matzah, thus we take all 3 matzot and we say, Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. So that we're saying the beracha of Hamotzi lechem min haaretz on 2 complete matzot. Once we've said the beracha Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, then we can drop the bottom matzah. That's no longer needed because we've done the beracha of the bread, i.e. the matzah, on the 2 matzah. Once we've completed the blessing of Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, then we have only the top matzah, the middle matzah, and then we say the second blessing, al achilat matzah, for the mitzvah of eating matzah. And here we are told in halakha that you have 2 portions. You have a kazayit, and I'll say what kazayit means in a moment. You have a kazayit of matzah from the top matzah and a kazayit from matzah from the middle matzah. The reason why, even though the Torah tells us very clearly that all you have to do is eat 1 kazayit, 1 piece of matzah in the evening. However, there is a debate when we say the beracha of al-achilat matzah, is it going on the top complete matzah, or is it going on the broken matzah? Some argue it's going on the top matzah, that's the complete one, that's the one in front of you. Others argue it's going on the middle matzah because that's the broken matzah, and that's the mitzvah which we're meant to be eating. Therefore, because of this doubt, we end up having 2 pieces, one from the top matzah and one from the middle matzah, the complete one and the broken one. However, what's important to recognize, this only applies to the master of the house, i.e. the one conducting the Seder. Everyone else around who are getting pieces from the master of the ceremony, of ceremonies, he does not need to, everyone else does not need to have 2 pieces. Yeah, everyone else needs to have 1 kazayit. Only the person who's leading the Seder, who has the matzot in his hand, only he needs to have a kazayit from the top and the middle matzah. How much is a kazayit? Okay, so how much is a kazayit is a big topic. In short, many of the authorities of today recommend 27 grams to be a kazayit. And we, Sfaradim, take this in weight. So 27 grams is what we say. However, there is room to say that 18 grams is also sufficient. If one is having 2 kezetim, then you have 18 plus 18, that will suffice. If one's having the one piece, then one should try to get 27 grams in order to fulfill the mitzvah from the Torah of the matzah. Now, what's important to recognize, and I've said this in the past, is that it's more important not to speak between motzi matzah and the end of korech sandwich than not speaking between rohtzah and motzi matzah. And let me explain what I mean by that. Strictly speaking, we should know that it's permissible for a person to speak in between washing one's, during the year, not just on Pesach, during the year. Strictly speaking, it's permissible for a person to wash their hands for bread, dry their hands, say the blessing and dry their hands, and then speak until they're ready to say Hamotzi Lehminat. So strictly speaking, on a Friday night, as long as one washes their hands, says the blessing and dries it once their hands are fully dried, and they're waiting to do the Hamotzi for the other people, they are allowed to speak. Okay, it's recommended not to, but strictly speaking, it's permissible to do so. And the same applies on Pesach night. However, from when one says the beracha of Hamotzi Lehminat and Achilat Matzah, that blessing continues for also the matzah which we're going to eat in the korech sandwich. Similarly, when we say the blessing of al achilat maror, that blessing is also continuing for the maror which we are going to consume in korech. Therefore, when we say the blessing of achilat matzah and achilat maror, one should not converse in things which are outside what's immediately necessary. So anything got to do with the matzah, with the maror, pass me the salt, or pass me the haroset, or pass me some lettuce, or how is this enough? Is this not enough? Do you need more? That's all fine. But anything unrelated to the immediate mitzvot which we are doing, that should be avoided. That should be avoided. Now, the matzah has to be eaten leaning, as we've explained, the importance of leaning. And we should also know that the matzah should be eaten in a certain time frame. Really, one shouldn't just have a tiny piece and then wait a bit and have a piece later on. One should be having the kazait, which we've said is between 18 to 27 grams in the time frame of between 4.5 to 9 minutes or so. So preferably within under 5 minutes. One should be doing. So if one eats it normally, one can do that. One kazait, absolutely fine. And that's this. By the way, that's the second biblical mitzvah of the night. So if you didn't have any time, or you don't have any chance to focus, the absolute bare minimum is the kiddush at the beginning of the night, the telling of the story, just talking about it briefly to one's child, and eating a piece of matzah. So these are the highlights of the evening. And those are the really important parts, which we should know that when we are performing the mitzvah. Now, the reason we have maror is to remember the bitterness in Egypt. However, this is not mandated biblically, because the Torah tells us that the mitzvah of eating maror is in conjunction with the mitzvah of eating the paschal lamb. Today, when we no longer have the paschal lamb, the eating of the maror is not required biblically. Nonetheless, it's still required rabbinically to remember the maror which we ate together with the korban pesach. And again, here we are meant to be eating a kazait, again the same amount. And here we submerge the maror into the haroset. We submerge it into it. The reason why it's actually written this exact word, in Hebrew, the shkoa, is to submerge. We submerge the maror into the haroset. And the reason we submerge it into the haroset is to remember the mortar and the back-breaking work in Egypt. However, people who do that forget the next part, the next word in the halacha, which is you're meant to shake it off afterwards, because you're meant to retain a taste of the maror. The maror is meant to be theoretically bitter. Ashkenazim do, I think, a much better job than we do at it, and you're meant to maintain that bitterness. And if you submerge it into the delightful charoset, which I'm just talking about, and I'm really excited for it, then you lose all taste of the maror. So you're meant to submerge it. So you have this concept of the mortar and everything, but then you're meant to shake it off so that you only have just a bit of it remaining.
So,
Then you get to
Diane,
korech. Yeah.
may I ask a quick question? I know that it says somewhere in the Gemara that you use that as an antidote to the poisonous effect of the maror. That you dip it into the charoset. So we Sephardim don't have that,
No,
because
we
they
do. Everyone agrees you're meant to do it like that. You're meant to dip it in, but then so that's the antidote, but then not to the extent where it loses its taste.
because mostly that's what we do. The Ashkenazim seem to do.
No, I'll tell you where it comes. I'll tell you where the mistake comes from. It's not an Ashkenaz Sephardi thing. Absolutely not. I'm telling you, it's
No?
not. It's
What is it?
misunderstanding. I'll tell you where it comes from in a second. You'll see. Then we get to korech. Now, why do we have korech? We've done the mitzvah of matzah. We've done the mitzvah of maror. And really, that would be good enough. However, there was one opinion of Hillel who said that the mitzvah of eating the matzah has to be eaten in conjunction with the maror. That's why we have it together. But really, the halakha doesn't follow that. We do it as an extra nice thing. Once we've done the mitzvah of eating the matzah and the mitzvah of eating maror, we have fulfilled our duties. But we do the korech as a nice sandwich to remember the opinion of Hillel, who held they had to be tied together. Now here, because we've essentially already performed the mitzvah of the matzah and the maror, here it's written that you're allowed to submerge the maror into the haroset and you don't have to shake it off. This is where the misconception comes from. That because in korech one's allowed to, one thinks maror as well. No, maror one has to taste the lettuce, one has to taste the bitterness. So you put it in and you shake it off. When it comes to the korech though, the sandwich where it's just it's a nice thing, we've already performed the mitzvot, there we are allowed to actually submerge it in and to enjoy it and to have more of it. And once you've had the sandwich, then you can start the meal, you can do what you want, you can have more maror, more haroset, and you can enjoy as much as you want of it. But that's, and of course, we don't lean for the maror because it's a bitter thing. Obviously, it's not necessarily a nice thing. So that's the korech. And sometime during the meal, it's customary to have the egg. Okay, there are different customs with regards to the eating of the egg, and people get very excited about this. Some have it at the beginning of the meal, some have it at the end of the meal, some in fact have it before Magid, by the way. It makes absolutely no difference when you have it. If you know what your parents' custom was or is, you do that. If you don't know, have it during the meal. It really makes no difference at all. Probably, I imagine it probably got brought forward to Magid because people were too hungry. They saw these eggs sitting on the table and they were starving hungry and just helped themselves to the egg. But it doesn't really make a difference where it's eaten. If you have a custom, follow it. If not, the Syrian custom is that we have it right at the end of the meal before Birkat Hamazon. As I said, it doesn't really make a difference. And it's certainly not worth fighting. The amounts of times I've heard of fights about when to eat the egg, that's certainly not the right thing to do.
Excuse me, you're talking about the egg from the dish?
No. The boiled egg.
No, a regular separate hard-boiled egg, although you're mentioning something from the Seder dish.
Okay, so that's an interesting question you raised. I'm talking about the egg which is from the Seder dish, which is to remind ourselves of the Korban Hagigah. Now, it's an interesting thing is that, strictly speaking, one can take the things off the Seder plate and eat it from there. The Arizal said, this is Kabbalistic, that one shouldn't eat from the plate because you need to ensure it retains its full, you have the full Seder complete until the end of the night. But halachically, one can take the egg from the plate if necessary and eat it, even though it won't be left on the plate. The purpose of the plate is there so that you enjoy the plate and you eat from it. Yeah, that was how it started, the idea of the Seder plate. Then it took on its own Kabbalistic significance, and so we were told, okay, don't eat anything off the plate. But halachically, it's absolutely fine. In fact, that was how things were. You would eat it from the plate.
It's really interesting. I haven't heard that one before because they have the hard-boiled eggs at the beginning of the meal, and that I don't even remember growing up with that. Okay. Thank you.
Fine.
Hi, may I ask you quickly? Our custom was not to have hard-boiled eggs at all. My father was very much steeped in Kabbalah, so that could be the reason why it was left on the plate for Zecher Korban Chagiga, and that was it. We never had it until I married an Ashkenazi. So is that
you managed to get an extra egg every Pesach because of that.
But I mean, does it matter? It doesn't matter, does it? No, that you.
Doesn't really doesn't matter. Yeah. Really
No.
doesn't.
No. Thank
Okay.
you.
Now the meal. Enjoy the meal. Then we get to afikomin, safun. Now the afikomin. The reason why are we having another piece of matzah? We had a piece of matzah at the beginning. Fine. We had the second piece of matzah. We said to fulfill Hillel's opinion for the sandwich. Lovely. Now I'm having the third piece of matzah. Why am I having a third piece of matzah? This is rabbinically required, and this is to remember the Korban Pesach. Because we would have normally on the night of Pesach, we would have the meat of the lamb. That would be the highlight of the night with the matzah, to be able to eat the meat of the Korban Pesach. We don't have that, and next best is we take matzah and we eat the matzah to remember the Korban Pesach. One piece suffices for the afikomin, and it's important. Halachically, this is eaten before midnight. Midnight this year is 1 minute past 1. Okay, so if you want to spend hours talking about Egypt, that's great. You have the whole night after 101 to do that till the morning, as the 5 rabbis did in the Haggadah. Okay, but that shouldn't come at the expense of missing the deadline of afikomin. One should really try to ensure that they say and eat the afikomin before midnight, because that's the correct time to eat it. Because the Korban Pesach was eaten before midnight, and by eating the afikomin, remembering the Korban Pesach. Therefore, it makes sense that we eat it just before afikomin. Again, we should be leaning with this, and halachically, one shouldn't eat food after afikomin. The reason being is because you're meant to keep, because of our love for the mitzvah of eating of the matzah, we want to maintain the taste of the matzah in our mouths until the next morning. That's why it's written, you can have tea, you can have coffee, these things, of course, but all the desserts should be served before afikomin. So you have your meal with the desserts, and then as you're ready to say Birkat HaMazon, Barech, at that point, we have the afikomin, so there's no necessity to have to eat after it. Don't forget, Birkat HaMazon, Barech, is a mitzvah from the Torah. It's a mitzvah as important as the mitzvah of eating matzah. That's often what we do. We forget that we do mitzvah throughout the day, which is as important as eating the matzah. The matzah is once eaten, we get excited. But Birkat HaMazon is an essential part as well for Seder. We should make sure we do it correctly. Following this, we do the third cup, and here we definitely say the blessing of Borei Pri HaGefen, because we said Birkat HaMazon, and then we say the Hallel. We say the Hallel. We pour the fourth cup, and we say the fourth cup on the Hallel, and we're meant to say it in unison. It's written halakha. We should say it together. We should sing it and say it together. It's not just it's the end of the evening. Everyone's tired and just rushing through it alone on their own. Yeah, shouldn't be like that. One should be together in unison, reciting the Hallel, and this Hallel is a prayer. Hallel is a prayer, and that is value where we say it because we're praying. It's praise to Kadosh Baruch Hu, as opposed to the Magid earlier on. Okay, we finish off with the Nivtzah. Nivtzah is some songs. I'll end off with an idea why we say the Nivtzah. What's this concept of Nivtzah, and why we end this special holy evening with a bunch of sometimes strange songs, which need their meaning needs to be uncovered. So that I think it's a psychological idea that when your mind is focused on something, then you manage to connect everything in your life to it. So we're told, the Hachamim tell us, the reason why Kadosh Baruch Hu commands us to put techelet, to put blue strings on our tzitzit, is because the blue reminds us of the sea, and then the sea reminds us of heaven. Okay, now I always say, I think today, most of us would probably associate the blue on our tzitzit with Chelsea than with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the sky. But when you're living your life with a recognition of God in your life, then yes, you see blue, and you think you trace it back to the sky through the seas. And the color red for violent people, for bloodthirsty people, they will associate the color red with blood and with danger and with negative things, but with other people will associate it with positive things, with excitement, with passion, etc. And that, I think, is what we're trying to demonstrate at the end of the evening with the Had Miodea, Shnai Miodea, is that we've reached such a level through the evening You throw me out any number, throw me out, and I'll make some kind of a Jewish association with it. 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through to 13. I'll make some kind of Jewish connection to it. Okay, so that is a brief synopsis of what's required in the Seder and a bit of an understanding of it. If there are any questions that you've had throughout the years and you've never really understood, which you would like to understand, please do feel free to ask now. Anything which wasn't clear during the shiur, please feel free to ask. But for those who are leaving now, I wish you all a wonderful Chag Kasher Sameach, Tzkushi Rabot and Motot Tovot. And may you have a meaningful, inspiring, and wonderful Chag together with your families and wherever you're going to be.
Very much.
Thank you very much, and Chag Sameach.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Chag Sameach. Yeah, thank you very much.
Very much, Modim. Chag Sameach.
Chag
Chag Sameach. See you, James.
Jameson.